everyone, Steve and Daniele here, holistic health coach and founder at Team Euphoric. Today I'm going to be taking you through some thoracic and lumbar mobilizations using a foam roller. Before we get started, I'd just like to take this time to remind you that if you are interested in obtaining a copy of this board that you see to my right, I will be uploading a picture of it on our Instagram account as well as our Facebook page, so be on the lookout for that. I'll also be including a link in the description box to our Facebook page as well as our Instagram account. Before I get into the actual mobilizations, let's quickly recap what we learned last week about the major joints of the body. Again, there are hundreds of joints in the human body. For the purposes of mobilizations and stretches, we will just be focusing on the 11 major joints. Starting most inferiorly and working superiorly, we have our ankle joint. Above our ankle joint, we have our knee. From there, we have our hips. Then we have our lumbosacral joint, our intervertebral lumbar joints, our intervertebral thoracic joints, so that's our lumbar column and our thoracic column. We then have our shoulder joints, elbow, wrist, and then moving superiorly from there, we have our intervertebral cervical joints and our atlanto-occipital joint. So let's talk about the mobilizations. The first is going to be the thoracic mobilization on the foam roller. For the thoracic mobilization on the foam roller, what you are going to do is lay supine, so on your back, and place a 3 to 4 inch foam roller horizontally under your thoracic spine. One quick thing to note, you are going to start at the most inferior intervertebral thoracic joint and work your way superiorly by one vertebrae. Next, you will place your fingers, you are going to interlock them behind your head, and you are going to inhale, bend backwards as far as you can, and then you are going to exhale, and as you exhale, try and bring yourself a little bit farther back. One thing, when you are interlocking your fingers behind your head, you are not pulling on your head. Your hands are simply there just to support the weight of your head. You are then going to move superiorly by one segment and continue to do so until you have completed the mobilization at all of the thoracic levels. One thing when performing a thoracic mobilization on a foam roller, you only want to perform the thoracic mobilization at the segments where you have hyperkyphosis, so excessive curvature of the thoracic spine. You don't want to perform it at areas where you have hypokyphosis, so more of a flattened spine, because that's just going to make you more hypokyphotic. So only perform the exercises at areas of hyperkyphosis. Also, when placing the foam roller on your back, you want to place it between the spinous processes of your thoracic vertebrae. You don't want to place it directly on the spinous process. That's going to be very painful and you can hurt yourself. Now that we know where exactly we're going to be placing the foam roller, how are we going to figure out where our spinous processes are? Well, if you were to palpate inferiorly and work your way superiorly above the lumbar spine, eventually you would realize this little bit of a dip that goes on in your thoracic column. The second you reach that dip, that is your T12S1 junction. Moving from there, the way to determine where exactly the spinous process is, it's going to be roughly one thumb width in between each of the spinous processes. Also, there's this thing called the rule of threes when determining where the spinous process is. Every single thoracic vertebrae is going to have a transverse process, so that is a lateral projection. If this is your spinous process, the transverse process projects laterally. The spinous process is going to project posteriorly and inferiorly. Now with your T1 to T3, so again, rule of threes, so every 3 segments, the level of the spinous process is going to be at the same level of the transverse process of that corresponding vertebrae. So if, for example, you are trying to palpate your T1 vertebrae, the spinous process of your T1 is going to be at the same level as the transverse processes of your T1. The next 3 is going to be T4 through T6. For T4 to T6, the spinous process is going to be 1/2 segment below the transverse process of the corresponding vertebrae. So if this is the body of your thoracic vertebrae, this is the transverse process. The spinous process is going to dip 1/2 segment below that transverse process. Next, we have T7 to T9. For T7 to T9, the spinous process is going to dip 1 full segment below the transverse process of that corresponding vertebrae. From there, T10 again is going to be 1 full segment below the transverse process of T10. T11 is going to be 1/2 segment below the transverse process of T11, and T12, the spinous process, is going to be at the same level of your T12 vertebrae. Now that we know exactly where the spinous processes are and how exactly to locate them, let's get into the lumbar mobilization on the foam roller. For the lumbar mobilization on the foam roller, you're going to lie supine again, so on your back. You're going to extend your arms out to your side. Your hands are just going to be there for stabilization purposes. You are going to then place a foam roller in between your knees and ankles. So you are using one foam roller, placing it vertically in between your knees and ankles. You are then going to rotate your lumbar column. So you are going to drop your knees to the side, bringing them as low to the ground as you possibly can. If, when you're lowering your knees, your contralateral shoulder, so that means the opposite shoulder. Let's say we are rotating our knees to the left side, and we are trying to bring our knees to the ground on the left side. If our right shoulder comes up off the ground, that means we've rotated too far. So what you want to do is, as you are rotating, if you notice that your shoulder is coming up off the ground, you want to stop just short of where your shoulder begins to lift off the ground. You are then going to repeat the process to the opposite side. Once you have completed that, you are going to alternate back and forth from left to right, repeating it 10 times per side. One more thing to note with this exercise is that you are going to be doing it at a breathing pace, which means you're not going to be going super fast or super slow. Just whatever your normal breathing rate is, that's the rate at which you will be rotating side to side. So you're going to inhale when your knees are up at the center line, and then as you start to drop your knees, you're going to exhale, and as you exhale, try to drop your knees as low to the ground as you can. Now that we have discussed the thoracic mobilization on the foam roller as well as the lumbar mobilization on the foam roller, it is time for the demonstration. The only equipment you will need to perform the thoracic and lumbar mobilization that I'm going to be showing you is a foam roller. Just a quick reminder of how exactly you are going to determine which areas you will be foam rolling. You're only going to foam roll the areas where you are hyperkyphotic, which means if you have an excessive curve, those segments are going to be the segments that you will be mobilizing. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will be going through all of the thoracic vertebrae. However, when you do it on your own, just mobilize the areas that are hyperkyphotic. To begin, I'm going to start at my lowest thoracic vertebrae, which is my T12. To find the T12, again, you're finding that little dip in your lumbar and thoracic spine. Where the dip becomes a little bit more prominent, that is going to be your T12-L1 junction. I'm now going to place the foam roller over that area. I'm going to place my hands around the back of my head. Again, I'm not pulling on my head, they're just there for support. And I'm going to inhale as I go back. And exhale. To get a little bit more of a stretch and open up the chest, you can also open up the arms. Just roll down to the next segment. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And you are going to do this the entire thoracic column until you get to your T1, which is at the bottom of your cervical column. Once you get to the areas where you're not able to reach the floor, you are going to inhale as far as you can and then exhale and let your breath naturally take you down to the ground. So the natural weight of your torso is what's taking you down to the ground. You're not forcing it. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Next is the lumbar mobilization. For the lumbar mobilization, you are going to be placing the foam roller between your knees and your ankles. You are laying on your back. Put your arms out to the side just to keep you stable. And you are going to exhale as you go down to the ground. Inhale as you come back up to the top. And exhale to the opposite side. For this exercise, it is very important that you keep your shoulders on the ground. So as you are rotating towards one side, you want to make sure that your shoulder doesn't come up. You are going to perform this for 10 repetitions on each side. And you are going to perform it nice and slowly at a breathing pace. You don't want to just swing from side to side. Once you have finished the exercise, you are going to come back towards the center and you are going to roll over to get out of the position. You don't want to do a crunch because we just finished mobilizing your spine. You don't want to place unnecessary strain on your low back. This concludes the demonstration for today. Again, if you are interested in obtaining a copy of the board that I had earlier during the lecture, I will be uploading it onto our Facebook page as well as our Instagram account. I will also be including a link in the description box to our Instagram account as well as our Facebook page. Next week, I will be taking you some mobilizations and stretches to help open up the hips. So be on the lookout for that, and I will see you again next week. If you liked the video that you saw today, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.